Hello again, my name's Jude Pullen and I'm a creative technologist working with the Design and Technology Association, exploring new learning contexts for D&T in schools. Whilst working with the MIT Media Lab in Berlin, I heard a great maxim about inclusive design: nothing about us without us. It serves as a warning to not design assuming others think or behave like you do. A way to avoid assumptions is to be sure to include the end user in the design process from the start, and not just hastily tagged on at the end. Before embarking on an inclusive design project with students, it's worth asking them about how their preconceptions of what terms like impairment, disability, handicap, and inclusivity mean. As even as someone who has worked a little in this space, the range of definitions and statistics are worthy of investigation and reflection. The WHO estimates around 15% of the world's population has some form of disability, of whom 2 to 4% experience significant difficulties in functioning. As someone who is dyslexic, I find the term disability a complex label, and many may well prefer neurodivergent as a more modern update. This metric would mean that 30 to 40% of the population are neurodiverse. And although arguably few people today consider long or short-sightedness a profound disability, it's estimated that around 75% of the world needs glasses or contact lenses. So my point is to avoid getting into semantics or indeed undermining anyone's personal choice of how they wish to define themselves, and rather for young designers to engage in a worthwhile discussion about there being a spectrum of ability. And to make clear that just as there's not a hard filter of abled and disabled people any more than we have a specific definition of a so-called normal person, what matters is that the empathic design process is appreciating someone whose life is different to yours and allowing these insights to guide your collaboration with them. Designing for ourselves is comparatively easy. We largely know our particular strengths, weaknesses, tastes, motives, environment, and social or political ethics, etc. Designing for your family and friends is a little harder, as although you might share cultural and ethical similarities, your grandparents may, for example, find things difficult that you do not. Many student projects often create assistive devices for elderly, and although these are laudable efforts which build empathy and are often profoundly personal and life-changing, there is a fair warning from industry not to simply go through the motions and design an example like a pickle jar opener when this item is readily available online with good reviews for around £5. Unless you truly have created a game changer, you risk reinventing the wheel. And this gains the student and the school less admiration from industry. Students might even consider designing for their future selves. Looking 30, 40, 50 years out, this has the effect of not othering old people and emphasizing good design for all. In TV, there's a saying of avoid working with kids and animals as they're unpredictable and they don't always conform to adult expectations. This is often a signal of a good potential D&T project, as you have a meaningful user who is somewhat wayward, like the squirrel in our previous learning contexts, and yet unlike a squirrel, it has an owner or parent who is an important secondary user. To also factor this into the design considerations. Indeed, this layering of design considerations, albeit small, is an excellent preparation for future industry skills, where such layering can end up being in double figures. So start young. Lastly, I've worked on shows like BBC Two's Big Life Fix, which help people with various disabilities through use of clever technology. I would say that these are great projects for students to engage with, but an acid test is that the project should be designed with the end user, not for them in isolation. The reason industry often consider these projects a little bit higher pedigree is that often the designer is having to design for someone very different than themselves. Design for disability, or should we say another ability to you, is a good starting point, and often students emerge from the process being inspired to explore inclusive design, i.e. not just see things as other or secondary to them, but see it as part of a larger worldview. Indeed, this can be a perfect time to introduce students to what is referred to as the social model of disability. The social model recognizes that all people have different capabilities. People only become disabled when those capabilities are a poor fit for the world around them. As designers, we can try to improve the world and so reduce the disability people experience. To give some examples of this, my 3-year-old son was able to exit our kitchen door and step down into the garden, but because of the step, upon his return, being 8 inches lower now, he was unable to grasp the handle and get back into the house. So I created this little hack to give him a lower secondary handle outside. I mentioned this as I want to point out that this hack, or basically what you might call a quick fix, still worked. And had I found a larger market appeal and applied further design to it, it might have been a great product. But in all seriousness, my point is that design can start with such a small hack, so keep that in mind. In 1990, LEGO released the brick separator tool. In hindsight, you might wonder why it took so long, but clearly small fingers cannot always pry similar bricks apart. So this is a great tool. And it makes the point about there being a spectrum of ability. My 5-year-old son uses this tool as a necessity, as his fingers are not as strong as mine, whereas I use it for convenience and to set a good example and avoid cracking my fingernails or leaving bite marks on bricks. When designing hairstyling products with Kyle Elson for Big Life Fix, these are certainly focused on design challenges from the individual's specific wants and needs. The process began with quick hacks and rough prototypes and became more nuanced with successive versions and brings to bear the full spectrum of typical D&T skills, from material science through mechanical design as well as, of course, aesthetics. Many graduates often ask me, how do I get a job at LEGO, Dyson, Apple, etc.? And if I were to give them a somewhat oversimplistic answer, I would advise them to do projects like this for 2 key reasons. Firstly, generally speaking, most of these companies will value the integrity, humility, and grit needed to design something for someone radically different than what you're familiar with. As brands, they have values beyond their products, and they know the sort of creative mind that can encompass more users can create greater profits and help more people too. Indeed, the term research in design need not be synonymous with white lab coats, as it's as much about being curious and observant and asking incisive questions. Again, great skills to cultivate. Secondly, if you're considering creativity a little bit like fitness or mental gymnastics, something that you build muscle up through practice, then designing for others with severe disabilities or very niche abilities is sometimes referred to as extreme use cases. This is a way to push your limits as a designer. The best of these companies find that whilst working on a tricky problem for someone in an unfamiliar situation, this creates a sort of reset in the design team. They start to challenge their lazy assumptions, broaden their horizons, and get excited about the things they see around them with fresh eyes again, and find more opportunities. Indeed, when you look back through history, some of the most remarkable breakthroughs have been either from people who were outsiders or who worked in subcultures or niches, and then those became mainstream. The best innovative teams deliberately infuse this rebel DNA or think different mentality as a matter of hiring and culture. Design still can be a sanctuary for the iconoclast. Whether your students start designing a game for younger children, solve a problem for an aging family member, design a device for someone with an uncatered need, these are all part of the mindset that makes the other feel more included. And again, I struggle to think of many other subjects which actively mandate this as both a skill to be mastered and an ethos to live by. Ideally, your students will have direct access to the user, or possibly via video calls or other virtual means. If this is not possible, short video clips from potential clients describing the problem and how it makes them feel and where they cannot achieve what others take for granted are a good starting point. Demonstrate the problem and the joy that working a solution can bring. Although cheap marketing tactics will seek to create scarcity and then them versus us dynamic, the best designers foster new ways to bring us together. To be sure, the inclusive route is a longer road for students and for teachers, but it truly is at the core of what makes a good designer great. Thank you so much for watching. Please do send comments and questions below, and thanks again. Bye.